A very warm welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining in. We'll be starting very soon. In the meantime, if you want to introduce yourself, you could please use the chat function and share your name and the place you're joining from.
Okay, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world, and it's fantastic. I can already see from the chat that we have people joining from all over the place. So that's great. Welcome. If you're tuning in for the first time and to CMS InTouch event, then welcome for the first time. And if you've joined our previous events, then welcome back. It's fantastic. Fantastic to have you all here. We will be starting our 11th, I believe, is it 11th or 14th? I'm losing track a bit, event in the Publishing Critical Work series with the fantastic journal, which is Gender, Work and Organizations today. We will have an hour, but before I hand you over to the wonderful editors who are here, I just wanted to say a few words. When we started CMS InTouch nearly 2 years ago now, so it was International Labour Day, 1st of May 2020, towards the beginning of the pandemic, we really wanted to bring our critical management community together, at the time when we all separated and divided around the world and facing this new danger of the virus. But we always thought that there's value in connecting and dialogue in connecting across boundaries of all kinds for all of us beyond the pandemic. And now, almost 2 years later, I really think that that has been the case. That it seems that we're facing new dangers, new divisions, new evil. Or old evil incarnated in new ways, almost every day, new violence, new oppression, suffering, pain, and in particular today, I'm thinking about, and we're all thinking on behalf of all of us here today, I wanted to just express the solidarity with the people of Ukraine and who are facing war, death, distraction, suffering, and also solidarity with anti-war activists in Russia as well, who are trying to stand up to their government. And I'm saying this as a Russian, but as a Russian who also has Ukrainian roots, that this is a really difficult time. So I wanted to just express the solidarity and say that this is wonderful to be able to persist in small ways for us all to come together. And in any way we can to try to connect, to keep our dialogues going, and to overcome these terrible things that are happening in the world. And I thank you all for being here. Now on a slightly more cheerful note, I just wanted to welcome the wonderful, wonderful editors of Gender, Work and Organization. In this series in particular, I wanted to bring the international critical management studies community together across boundaries, as I was saying, but in ways that create a dialogue between the editors of journals who not only welcome, but actively encourage and support and create spaces for critical work in our field with their communities of scholars, with you, and create this dialogue so we can find spaces and new ways of expressing critical scholarship. So, and Agenda Work and Organization is an amazing journal. And I know with how much care and kindness and love and humility Alison and Banu and Emmanouela and Alice and their colleagues are working and creating this journal space. And so it's an absolute delight to have them here with us today. So welcome to this space. And just before I hand over to Banu, just a small household, practical, boring task, but I can see you're already engaging in the chat, which is fantastic, with comments. If you have any questions, so we will have an hour for the session, and if you have any questions for Alison, Banu, Emmanouela, and Alice, please feel free to ask them at any time, but please put them in the Q&A function of the chat function, which is at the bottom right of your screen. There's like two little speech bubbles. If you could put the questions there, then it will be easier for us to spot them out of just general chat comments and make sure that Alison, Banu, Emmanouela, and Alice see them at the end of the discussion. And there will be time at the end to hopefully to engage with those questions. So yes, this is just the boring bit out of the way. And now with absolute delight, I'm passing you on into Banu's hands, I think, who is talking first. Over to you, Banu.
Thank you so much, Alex. And, you know, as editors, we also want to echo and support the words of Alex in terms of expressing solidarity for the people of Ukraine and those standing up for oppression in Russia and elsewhere, including our colleagues and friends across the globe who are demanding better working conditions in their university settings, as we know that the working conditions in our field have deteriorated greatly over the years. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think the idea of creating that space for safety and exploration of ideas that may run counter to mainstream is very much at the core of WO. And what I'm going to do today is to give you a brief overview using our traditional PowerPoint, but then we want to engage in what we call doing things differently here at WO, which is engaging in conversation and community with each other and with you. So without further ado, let me share my screen, which I will need permission for apparently, to share with you, thank you, the PowerPoints that we have ready for today's presentation. So let me do that right away. So these are numbers. I'm going to go over them. We value numbers, but we are not driven by numbers at WO. We're driven by supporting and growing our community of feminist scholars and scholarship. So the numbers you see here today were extracted by our administrative colleague at Wiley in the middle of January. What you're going to notice is that over time we have grown tremendously. These are the number of new submissions. When you add revisions, we're actually close to 1,200 for last year. So we're tracking actually beyond that this year. So we're likely going to hit 1,300, even 1,400 with the revisions. So that's been wonderful. It's also been, I think, a testament to the growing interest in the kind of work that gets published in GLOW, which we will cover. Over the years, we have made efforts to I would say internationalize and make sure that we are including voices from scholars and about scholarship from parts of the world that are traditionally not represented in our journals. We still remain dominated by UK and US numbers of submissions, but we are rapidly seeing growth from places like India, as well as Turkey. We actually have a growing number of scholars in Latin America who are submitting, as well as those that are in the African subcontinent. So we have very intentionally and purposefully made sure that this is a space that welcomes all kinds of scholars and scholarship rather than being dominated by a few players in the global north. And we will continue with this approach in the coming years. You'll notice that the submissions are on an upwards trajectory, and you kind of see little dips, valleys, and peaks, and that is, you know, par for the course in terms of what's happening. 2020 was an interesting year, and I'll get to that, but in general, we are seeing sort of rising submissions from across the globe. These are, sorry about that. These are accept and reject rates, you know, depending on where we are in terms of the cycle. This is where we usually end up. I want to point out that in 2020, we actually were very intentional about creating a feminist archive of experience during the pandemic. So absolutely, we wanted to accept articles that spoke to that experience, to that embodied and inequities that were sort of taking place. So here you'll see, in 2020, the rejection rate was lower and the acceptance rate was higher, and that was quite intentional. One of the things that we do want to point out is journals sometimes have an implicit and not shared goal of tracking a certain number of percentages for acceptance and rejections. And we don't really believe in this practice. We believe that we want to create a community, and we will accept high quality papers that are growing the community of scholars that we and scholarship around feminism and gender topics in terms of work and organization, which is to say that we will not reject you because we're trying to hit some target numbers. Again, you see the acceptances sometimes track, but not always the submissions, which makes sense. I don't want to call it a pipeline issue, but in reality, what we see is that submissions across the globe are increasing, and what we're trying to do is to make sure that the publications coming from different voices are being represented in the journal in terms of. I also want to point out that we are breaking this down as geography and not necessarily race or ethnicity or a sense of belonging of the scholar or by topic. And that's something we're going to be, I think, looking into in terms of breaking this down by a little bit more of a nuance than just straight up geography, because I think we'll see some nuances in terms of the kinds of scholarship and the kinds of people that are submitting to our journal. Again, I want to point out that 2020 was unique because of our intentional approach to accepting papers and making sure that we created an archive, and they've yet come up because we're at a different point in terms of the pandemic and the kinds of submissions that we're getting. In terms of the number of articles that we saw and published, again in 2020, we really almost 101% increased that because of creating that feminist archive, specifically in the feminist frontier section. And for those of you familiar, we put out a call, I would say within a few weeks of the start of the pandemic, soliciting papers in an open and ongoing call around experiences related to the pandemic, which was followed very closely by a call related to understanding the impact and ongoing effects of racism. And those are both still open calls, and we continue to receive papers in that. And we're creating archives. And I know Alison and Emmanouela will talk about sort of their vision for feminist frontiers as our new editors for those sections. We often talk about impact factors, and if you are familiar with how they are calculated, great. If not, a quick sharing of information here. Impact factors are calculated by the number of citable articles and the number of citations those articles receive. So given that we intentionally increased publications in 2020, the number of citable articles increased, which made our value go up, but not maybe as much as you would think that it would go up. So when you look at citations and impact factors, recognize that journals sometimes will want to keep the number of publications low to keep the number of cites high, because the more articles you have, it can impact actually your impact factor, because you might have 1 or 2 citations across a larger number of articles versus a lot of citations for a fewer number of articles that are published. So it's important to note that impact factors are calculated and percentages of numbers of papers accepted do impact it. These are some of our sort of top cited articles from the journal. You'll notice some familiar names there, but what we see, which is different from previous years, is that we are sort of tracking high numbers of citations for multiple papers rather than 1 or 2, which is, again, I think our aim to try and change some of the dynamics where one paper can make or break a journal's cycle for the year. We are really trying to engage in a community conversation, which means more people, more conversations, and potentially more citations. And I believe that is my last slide. So I'm going to end that show and start with what we believe are more important conversations around what are we doing at GROW and how can you be part of it, whether it's part of the publication, the networks that we are currently putting in place, the various conferences that we're hoping to have on an annual basis. I'm going to start by posing what I believe is a really important and relevant conversation related to our state of the field, but also the state of publishing in management and organization studies. And I'm going to start by asking the wonderful Alison Pullen, who has done incredible amounts of work to bring GROW to where it is today, to think about this idea of, feminism. What does it mean to be a feminist journal, and how does this feminist project come alive at GROW, in your view and experience?
Thanks, Banu. I think the work that's been done over the last 5.5 years since I joined the journal has been down to our community. So I think, gender work and organizations always had a strong community. It's always published critical papers on the ways in which genders organize, gender relations in work and organization, and always brought critical management perspectives to a lot of the theorizing work that we've done. But I guess since we've been working together, we've been instrumental in attracting papers that don't apologize for being feminist, and center feminist ways of knowing, feminist methodologies, feminist forms of activism, feminist forms of writing. And it's been really, really pleasing to see that as well as the European feminist influences that the journal's always had, that we now have these transnational feminist debates emerging from the South up and beyond borders. And indeed, that's a very important point to connect with this year's conference of decolonizing knowledge through feminism and through moving beyond borders. But I guess our success in growing the journal in relation to feminist ways of knowing and working has led to the appointment of Emmanouela and Alice as the new Feminist Frontiers editors. And we were so delighted that they were appointed, because they've both worked tirelessly behind the scenes for a long time. And that comes down to our emphasis on the community, fostering an ethics of care and relationality and embodiment, one of vulnerability as well as strength, picking up on some of the ideas that Alex talked about earlier. So maybe I should pass to Emmanouela now to ask what's yours and Alice's vision for Feminist Frontiers.
So first of all, I would like to thank you very much for hosting this event today here, and to thank very much Alison and Banu for their trust and for having appointed Alice and myself as Feminist Frontiers section editors. I'm really delighted to be part of this event and to be part of the GWO community. Speaking of how we envisage Feminist Frontiers in the context of the journal and what is the vision for Feminist Frontiers, our vision really here is to develop a community, to build a community which embraces difference, which embraces multivocality, which embraces multiplicity to emerge, and to be able actually to work with authors and reviewers to develop that space organically. I mean, we really want to develop feminist understanding that allows us to better make sense of the issues affecting our lives, the lives that we all live in different parts of the world. I mean, these are different lives, we all have different experiences. So, I mean, we really want to make space for these experiences to be talked about and to be heard and responded to. So it's really about creating feminist dialogues in that section, and actually advancing knowledge, a body of knowledge, which can be used to really better understand many of the challenges that we all face in different levels, in our social lives, in our academic lives, in our cultural lives, different aspects that this can be. I would also like to say that we're very happy to be surprised by what that might mean. I mean, we really welcome cutting edge pieces in that section. We welcome non-conventional work. So, I mean, I really want to approach these issues that can better advance an understanding of what feminist knowledge actually is through a combination of methodological and theoretical perspectives on that. And I would also like to ask Alice if she wanted to add something on that.
Thank you, and thank you so much again, the organizers, for having us here. This is such a lovely event, and so happy that so many could join us. I think your response was very comprehensive, Emmanouela. I would just like to again highlight that we see this as an emerging space. We're so grateful for how Banu and Alison started working with Feminist Frontier to carve out this space for feminist knowledge production, but that we don't know, we want not only to be surprised, but we want to see this as a form of community building where we really work together towards creating feminist knowledge production and make sure to foreground what it can do and in which ways we need it when moving forward with some of these challenges, as we see here, for example, that Alex was mentioning in the beginning, because there's so much perpetuation of inequalities in organizations in the world today that we really think that there's so much more for feminist knowledge production to do and to give. And with that, we would really want to see it as a place or a space for experimentation, but also for play, for care, for relationality, and that we could work with as a community. And I think one thing that we have been talking about as a group a lot, and what this event is also for, is to think about, okay, this is our visions for these spaces, but how do you go about if you want to develop a paper for us, and how does the process look thereafter? So I was thinking perhaps we could have an open question that Alison, Banu, and Emmanouela and myself could reflect on, which would be related to what kind of papers do you see, or what should an author have in mind when developing a contribution for GVO? Banu, would you like to start?
I'll start. Thank you, Alice. There are a couple of more, I would say, basic and technical aspects that you should consider, and then elaborating on those, maybe start with this approach. So, at the very basic level, please become, familiar with our aims and scope. I think many a times authors think we're a gender journal, and they will send us things that look at gender as a variable, or come to us from disciplines without really engaging in conversations and growth. So they'll look at differences between male and female managers in terms of their performance, for example, or they will engage in suggesting that their paper is feminist by stating it versus doing it. So we end up with papers that are very mainstream, but add a couple of ideas around feminism. And that, again, does not work. So one, make sure that you are very well aware and aligned with our aims and scope for the journal, which does have an explicit feminist or critical gender perspective. Second, it's very important that you understand the kinds of conversations, topics, and areas that the journal publishes and continues to publish, so that you can engage in conversations and understand the context in which you are trying to publish your work. That means that when you submit to us, did you actually engage in conversations? Did you actually even look through the kinds of works that are published in that space that you're in, and see if there were anything in GROW that you could reference or cite to either continue, challenge, or expand upon the conversations? If none of your references are from GROW, maybe rethink whether we're the right journal for you. And that's not to say that you absolutely have to cite us to get in. It's just, is the work that you're writing and publishing on going to make sense for our audience? Has there been work previously here on that topic? So that's sort of a second area. A third area is you should be very clear on your theoretical framing and the foundations of the paper, rather than provide something very descriptive or something that says, or something that skews heavily towards a quantitative paper without a theoretical foundation. We will, not often, but enough times, get quantitative papers that have a bloated middle part of methodology and very thin theory and findings and applications part. So those generally don't tend to fit well with us. Third, what is the relevance to the field in terms of your contributions? What kinds of contributions are you making to the field in terms of thinking through gender in relation to work and organization? Fourth, if you have an empirical paper, are your methods aligned and appropriate for the kinds of questions that you're trying to answer? So often we get papers that say, I interviewed the next number of people, and there's very little information on who they were, why they were chosen, and what kinds of engagement you had with the folks that you ended up engaging with. We, like other journals, let me say this again, we, unlike other journals, don't have a cutoff for the minimum number of subjects that your paper needs. We welcome autoethnographies and other sort of what we consider maybe alternative and different methodologies, more critical methodologies, to be part of our journal. But at the same time, they have to make sense for your theoretical framing, and that they have to be aligned with the purposes of your paper and your contributions. And then, lastly, I would ask you to think about, this is always helpful, just something brief and just signaling in your cover letter why you think your work fits with the journal. So we have a sense of what you are trying to accomplish. Sometimes we'll get papers and then we'll get a follow-up email that often says, hey, is this paper going to get reviewed? And, maybe this is the right time, but if your paper sort of meets these criteria, if it's sufficiently developed, all papers go through a review process at GROW, if they are particularly well developed and are aligned with the aims and scope of the journal or of the call for the special papers. We do take into consideration the style of the submission. So if you have a more creative versus a more conventional approach, we try to make sure that our reviewers and that process is aligned with what you're trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, those are very basic things. And beyond that, what's important is that you are trying to engage in conversation with a community, rather than, I would say, trying to publish something that just doesn't contribute to ongoing conversations. And we, again, as Alison and all of us have mentioned, are explicitly welcoming feminist works. I'll pause there. I know Alison has parts to add to that.
So, sorry, was it for Alison or?
Yes, I said Alison. I apologize if that got cut off.
Sorry.
No, I have nothing to add other than it's always fantastic when we get a paper that we haven't seen before, whether it's theoretically motivated by philosophy theory that we haven't published, or whether it's a new empirical site, or whether it's part of the world that we haven't published papers on. I think it's always fantastic to engage in contemporary issues and to see the ways in which academic spaces can challenge the patriarchy that's so oppressive, whether it's toxic masculinity in universities or in government creating wars. And we've fostered these spaces through writing papers, but also in the ways in which we speak and work differently together. So we look forward to your contributions in a multitude of ways, not just writing papers. And there's lots of different ideas there in the chat. So Alice, is it over to you next?
should we move on perhaps? Because I was thinking about another thing that I asked you when we first stepped. I remember like some time ago, Alison, I saw that you were posting regarding there's the dissonance with regards to the papers that actually get submitted and which papers get resubmitted after being offered to revise the manuscript. So in light of what we're here to talk today, I think it's very important that we also consider or think about this as a process. And so it's not just crafting the first version of the paper, but how do we move forward from there? And here I think we also want to tap into a little bit about what we think about reviewing practices and feminist reviewing practice in particular. So who would like to start?
Yeah, I can start. I think at GWO, we really want to create a space where it's not just about voicing issues that are engaging into different ways of knowing and thinking, but also reviewing in different ways and engaging into caring, non-violent reviewing practices. So as Alice is saying, it's really a process that papers go through to be able to get published and engage into academic dialogues. And so, I mean, we really want to nurture a space where reviewers can engage into this conversation in an embodied, relational, and caring way to actually help the authors to navigate the challenge of revising a paper meaningfully. I mean, even if I can bring one of my examples of publishing with GWO, even as an early career academic, I mean, I have to say that I was really very grateful to these reviewers that engaged so meaningfully with the paper and they gave so caring comments. It doesn't mean that they loved the paper, but I mean, they were able to actually pick up on these points that they thought needed further development and to really help guide me through that process in a very caring way, I have to say. So, I mean, engaging with the revision itself had been a very interesting process for me as an author to be able to navigate it and eventually to make it to publication. So I think it's a collaborative process. It's not an one-sided process. It really takes collaboration from different actors, be it authors, reviewers, and us as editors, of course, and the wonderful board of associate editors that are doing great work at GWO to really advance these understandings. I don't know if Alison or Banu wanted to add something on that, or Alice maybe on the reviewing part of it.
Alison.
Yeah, we have been working really hard to encourage people to write reviews in a supportive way. But I guess what's important to us in the revision is to stay true to the values of the research. Don't buy into reviewers who bring a particular perspective to your work. It's not often the expert, because we are the experts of our own work. So we're really interested in seeing you engage with the reviews and using the review comments that develop your papers in a way that fits the journal and improves the readership and the citation of the papers. And that is about looping back to earlier conversations. It really is about, making sure that there's a theoretical contribution, pushing whether there's a methodological contribution, engaging in the ethical debates of the ways in which research is done, and to produce a paper that is as well written as it can be in the time that you're revising it. And bear in mind that some of our calls coming forward will be engaging in different languages. So the special issue that is going to come out and is going to be advertised very soon from the Sao Paulo workshop, that will be published in Portuguese and English in part, and we've created spaces for multimedia forums. But I think, like any journal, it's better to think about how original and creative we can be with our work, as opposed to this over-publishing mentality. So what haven't we read? And the book review editors that we've got at the journal are producing fantastic book reviews and collaborative book reviews. And, you know, again, it's not just about writing for the journal, it's getting involved in the community. So I hope I've answered that or not. So where have we finished our planned conversation in terms of taking questions now? Or Banu, do you have more to add?
I would say, you know, in terms of thinking about reviewing and writing, on the other end, as a reviewer, you'll see me often tweeting, excuse me, about Grow and us and what are we doing and what can you do? You'll often find my tweets sort of give you sort of these 5 bullet points, a very American approach of what do you need to think about? And for our reviews, we really wanted to share with you that it is done in community rather than in violence. You should not be trying to erase other people's words or engage in gatekeeping, but really grow that scholar and think about, you know, the fact that even though it's a blind review, that you're still accountable for your words. And that is a really important consideration, that you're not there to tear someone down, but to really help them grow and see potentially different perspectives. So for us, reviewing is part of that embodied care of ethics that we try to espouse, and we really look for that in our review editorial board and those who review for us. We have so many growing questions, so maybe we should pivot to that. You know, again, as we mentioned, we do understand that folks want to get published, but at the same time, over-publishing doesn't help the field. It doesn't help our community very much. Let's see, there are so many questions right now that have come in. I'm going to click on, let's see, I think we have to go down to see them.
Banu, yeah. Banu, let me read the first question, and thanks to Ritesh behind the scenes for collating these for us, and then we'll see how we go in a collaborative sense. So the first question, thank you so much for raising this. Thank you for sharing the post in New Call for their associate editors. Would you consider recruiting more junior scholars and/or scholars who have yet, although inspired to publish in gender work and organization? So the last time we appointed Banu a new associate editor team, we decided to challenge the hierarchy of academe, and we appointed associate editors who had reviewed for us and had published the occasional paper, but we also mixed them in with research leaders in the field. Ideally, our associate editors need to have enough experience in order to be able to manage the review process that we've outlined. But there's always places on the editorial review board for more junior colleagues, especially if you're working in areas that we really need expertise in. So we're really looking for more people around LGBTI. We're really looking for more people who work with feminist methodologies. We need more transnational feminist work. We need more people that are masculinity theory scholars. So yeah, please get in touch with us, and we would love to talk to you more about that. Banu, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I actually want to add something much more high level, which is that we actually have an open call for associate editors, so that you don't see people popping on and saying, hey, congratulate me, I was just appointed associate editor, and you didn't even know that that was an available slot. And that is another area in which Alison and I have tried to make sure that we engage in sort of an open community approach, which is more transparency and how people come to occupy certain decision-making and gatekeeping roles in our scholarly community. So I wanted to add that in because that might be normalized now, but when we started doing it, in fact, when we started doing many of the things, they were not really the norm in our journals. So start by reviewing for us, come on the editorial review board. If there's alignment and interest for becoming an associate editor, when there's an opening and opportunity, please apply and understand the time commitment and the emotional labor that's associated with that. It's at least 6 to 10 papers a year right now. But as we grow, you know, that might also grow.
Yeah, there's another question here to all of us regarding the review process. Should I have published in the journal before becoming a reviewer? No, we're always looking for reviewers. And our approach is to select reviewers for papers that have theoretical and methodological expertise, and we pair experienced reviewers with novice reviewers. And, you know, I started as a PhD student with the journal, and, you know, that's what we like to do in GWO and always have. Banu, question 2 here. Maybe you could, Alice, did you put your hand up then?
Yeah, just to tap into what you just said, because perhaps you can also then share with this person how that person can be volunteer as a reviewer. I think that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, just get in touch with the journal assistant, and we'll find the email and put that in the chat now, and say that you want to review, and then you sign up in the system. You put your keywords in and your details, and then you're there, and you'll pop up every time we search for a keyword or even reach out to any of us. So thank you very much for your interest. There's another question here that will speak to many of us, but hi everyone, my question is about autoethnography and other alternative approaches. It seems like sometimes there is a fine line between alternative approaches in critical research and an opinion piece, for instance. How can we make sure the paper doesn't cross the line? Thank you. Well, who's going to go first?
I'll give it a try.
Go on.
So autoethnography is an interesting approach. I would challenge the author to think about why this methodology, what does that bring to the community, to the conversation that other methodologies don't. Number 2, recently we've had some challenges with autoethnography, really creating concerns for folks who become de-identified because the person writing at the end of the day identifies themselves, and within their small circle it becomes easy to identify other people that they're talking about. So you need to write with a concern over what you're saying about other people who may not know that you are writing. So it does really put the accountability on you and the responsibility on you to make sure that you engage in consent and in a form that makes sense for autoethnography. We have also seen in our field in some other journals that sometimes people fabricate information to write an autoethnography, and I think that really raises concerns on people's ethics in this field. There is definitely value around autoethnography in terms of highlighting sort of those embodied experiences you might have in the field or within a particular organizational context. We would just ask you to think about, what is the purpose of this particular methodology over others in the writing that you're doing. In terms of thinking about an opinion piece versus an autoethnography and somehow seeing that they are on a, I would say, some sort of spectrum, I would disagree with that, in that the idea of an opinion piece comes from normal science that says that academic and scholarly writing used to look a particular way. And those that do not sort of follow that end up being more sort of softer or non-scientific approaches to producing knowledge. And so I would want to think about, you know, how you see that relationship between a critical research piece and opinion piece, to understand that they come from very different epistemological foundations. And, you know, we would never call something an opinion piece in Guo. We would call it a provocation.
Yeah, and there's some congratulations to us for our multilingual language efforts from Charlotte Karam and Camilla Quental here, good friends and board members of Guo. Yes, that's really, we are really challenging the hegemony of the English language, and of course we have constraints by publishers, but we continue to push the boundaries there. Now we've got a really interesting and specific question thanking us all for the valuable information that we provided. First, I want to ask how long the review process takes on average. Then, due to the negative impact on the pandemic on women, especially working women with a dependent child, the number of articles submitted to your journal may be expected to increase dramatically. How do you predict that this will affect the review process? Thank you. Do you have that figure? So, okay, let me start generally here by saying that during the pandemic, we had no delays in papers because our supply of papers was high. Our community came to the rescue following various calls, and people even came out of retirement to review for us really quickly so that we could push the pandemic papers through. And we really wanted to do that as a journal because we realized that women's work was being devalued, both paid work and unpaid work. And we did some work around that. But we knew that over time, women's careers would be affected both in terms of looking for work, being promoted, and actually addressing the gender pay gap. So we have really, really pushed for fast turnaround times. And we got down to approximately just under 3 months for review time. But our review time is actually as good as our reviewers. And since the pressure of the pandemic has lifted in many parts of the world, and since we've returned to face-to-face teaching, etc., and other multiple demands, we are now suffering, let's face it, a collective fatigue. So actually finding reviewers for papers is much harder now than it was when the pandemic started and the first year of the pandemic. We are very unusual in the sense that we haven't been that affected by the slowing down of reviews or finding reviews. As you could see from the figures that Banu presented. But it really relies on people coming forward and wanting to offer their services, unpaid services. Again, so the more reviewers, the more we are able to publish efficiently with robust reviews. The Feminist Frontier section of the journal is designed to respond to contemporary issues in a quicker way because we offer internal review from our board. So that's a way to get papers that respond to particular calls or contemporary issues through. Yeah, look, we don't send out reviews that are incomplete or who are not supporting the community ethos of the journal. So we will continue to make sure that the review process offers the best experience for our authors, but occasionally and very occasionally we have a slow review process because of the reviewers that are chosen, and they tend to be in special issues associated with the journal because the machine is running smoothly, perhaps too smoothly sometimes. So we do acknowledge the work that women have picked up during the pandemic, and yeah, I think there's definitely the collective exhaustion taking place, which is another topic that we could engage in. Okay, who else? There's one for the group, number 5. Banu, can you see this one? I have a query. Like, do you accept scale validation papers pertaining to gendered issue? As I'm interested in publishing with this journal, thank you. That doesn't sound like a good fit for our journal. Oh, Banu, you're on mute. Sorry. Yeah.
2.5 years into it, still haven't figured it out. Scale development and validation is probably not a good fit for us because those are not the kinds of engagements that we want to have with gender. So I would suggest potentially another journal might be better for that. We have very rarely published, I think 1 or 2 bibliometric, but that was on Grow itself rather than sort of the field. So probably not a good fit for us.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, this point about autoethnography again. And Emmanouela, you might have had this experience given your autoethnographic prolific writing. They may be dismissed as opinion pieces. Yeah, they often are, except in feminist circles, which we really enjoy, don't we? Emmanouela, do you want to add?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just wanted to say that I think it's important in autoethnographic pieces, in my experience, at least, and also following reviews and I mean, in very interesting reviews that I read, and then I see, I mean, how the paper is read through the eyes of someone else, I mean, and how this person can actually help to advance the paper. I think it's important to not just limit into the very personal experience, I mean, to really understand what the eye is doing there in the paper and really to try to draw some broader implications of what that story means for our community, I mean, for the society, for academia, for the world. So I think there are always some learnings to get out of that. And it's important as authors to ask ourselves, what do I learn from that experience? I mean, how can I make this part of a larger debate? So in that sense, I think it doesn't mean that because it's an autoethnography, it's about just saying your opinion without caring about others saying. I mean, at the end of the day, we're engaging in debates. I mean, we publish because we want to dialogue with other people. And I think autoethnographic writing has a power, has a potential in doing so, but it just requires a certain reflexive engagement of the author with the event talked about, and of course, drawing on relevant theories that might actually help to further bring that point forward. So yeah, in that sense, I think GWO is a space that encourages, in my experience, this kind of explorations of what do different embodied experiences mean for academia, for society, for the world that we live in.
Yeah, thanks, Emmanouela. There's another couple of questions, and I'm watching the time too. Would GWO be interested in collaborating to build bridges with other mainstream business and OS and management journals to mobilize feminist narratives across publishers and journal silos? Can I say yes? I think we do in the case of some journals. and maybe not others, because it's very easy to be seen as competing for the same papers. But let's just say that the more feminist work that is affecting business and management journals, the better. Absolutely. And we always welcome some big feminist pieces that encourage debate. Here's one. Alice, how about you take this one? Thanks for a very informative session. I have a question. Can you elaborate on what is meant by nuance? We got reviews for our work, and one reviewer said our paper lacked nuance.
I think this is a very, very important question. And I think it also relates a little bit actually to the, for example, with regards to what Emmanouela and Banu pointed out with regards to the autoethnography and where the I stands. So I think often when a paper lacks nuance, it might not be very elaborate in terms of critical reflexivity. So the story that is put forward might be not generous enough in terms of accounting for how, for example, an empirical context or a theory can be used in various ways. So when we say creating dialogue, we mean also to look at ourselves and who we are as writing, what kind of, when we put forward a specific story, what are the pitfalls with that and what could that possibly lead? So really to open up towards, to be generous towards various perspectives. Also here, I think it's very important, or I think I speak for all of us as editors here, is that if you get comments that you might feel a little bit, they might not be clear to you, or you want to discuss, you can also always reach out to us. So for example, if this nuance question is posed in a way where it does not make sense to you, we are very happy, that's why we're here, to help you make sense of them so you can develop your work, because this is also part of the community building effort. We want to help you produce the best work you possibly can. And I would say that the best work is often with nuance and self-reflexivity. I hope that was clear.
Oh, that's perfect. And another one here, you mentioned along the lines of new digital formats that can be explored. Would that include artistic research pieces, animated videos, etc., as an alternative to written papers, in the sense of continuing feminine writing in other media? Do we do a collective yes? Yes, definitely. We'd love that. Thank you for creating such a space. Guo always feels like home. Yeah, it's hard to leave though, right? And it is a privilege to be part of this community. Thank you so much. I was wondering if it would be possible to organize a future event workshop on how to construct reviews with care. Yes, absolutely. We'd love to do that. Shaquille, thank you for your follow-up point about autoethnography has some ethical implications, especially when the authors are de-identified and a junior member in the organization they write about. Yes, and we're seeing that, thankfully, not in our spaces, but journal editors have a moral obligation to ensure that people being written about are protected. Lots of lovely comments about Emmanouela's work. Number 10 question. Hi all, can you please clarify the difference between feminist frontier section of the journal and an empirical original article of the journal? Who wants to do that?
Yeah, Alice, you want to go for that, or shall I start and then maybe you can?
You can start and I can fill in.
Okay, great. So, I mean, thanks a lot for that question. Actually, that's a very good question. I mean, in our understanding, I mean, we really want Feminist Frontiers to be a space for dialogue and really advancing feminist understandings in particular. I mean, traditionally in GWO, there have been also pieces which are not drawing on feminist perspectives to develop a feminist understanding of the subject talked about. But Feminist Frontiers is really about engaging with different feminist methodologies and theories to make us think differently of the potentials of feminists in particular. So it's really about feminist spaces. So, I mean, we're really looking for diverse feminist understandings, and I mean, really developing a feminist body of knowledge at Feminist Stronger. Alice, you wanted to add something to that?
And what I think we also really hope for, what Alison and Banu already started with the section, what we hope to continue is doing is creating these little pockets with special sections that particularly focuses on a specific issue. Like we now have this call out that Alison already linked regarding the climate emergency. So how we can then create these little bodies of feminist knowledge that targets and create debates around a specific topical issue.
Yeah, that sounds great. There's going to be an InTouch event on reviewing, so that's something to look out for. Somebody has said here, I like writing book reviews, especially if the book is written into another language. I can write the book reviews in English. Who should I contact to ask for writing a potential book review, especially in the Frontiers section? We will put those details in the chat now. The main person who's been doing it for some time is Anna Lopez, but 2 new book review editors have been appointed, and they're doing a fantastic job. And there are people here today who have done book reviews and done books in other language. So they're not just book reviews, they are translation pieces. And that's really, really important for bringing work to the journal that we haven't read before. And that's what keeps us breathing, as well as thinking and writing.
I think there's one more question from Lucy on theoretical contribution. Should it contribute to existing conversation in organization and management studies, or could it contribute to discussions in other disciplines? I think our thinking is that multidisciplinary work is fantastic. Feminist work seldom sits in silos, as does, critical gender work. So I think it would be helpful to understand how other disciplines and approaches are engaging in the conversation around a particular phenomenon or set of things that you're wanting to address. And I think that's important. And it kind of goes back to Charlotte's point around creating bridges across mainstream. When will feminism be mainstreamed in other journals is probably my question, versus being, a special chunk or a section or an issue. I think these kinds of engagements and conversations can normalize feminist scholarship across other disciplines and more mainstream spaces too.
Yeah, there was another follow-up about nuance. So there's some comments I've just put in here, meaning that sometimes when reviewers ask for nuance, we mean challenging assumptions, thinking through different layers of thought, that there are multiple interpretations. It could be that reviewers are asking for more depth, or they're asking for the theory to be applied to the empirics in different ways. Thanks, Shaquille, and thanks for following that up. That means a lot to us. It's an unusual word, nuance. Thank you for all your positive comments here. And thanks to Guy for your comments too. Thank you for your presentation. Regarding theoretical contributions, should the papers necessarily contribute to existing conversations? Did you do that, Banu?
Yeah, I think
did.
that was
Thank you. Sorry, it's midnight.
I know. I did do that, and I think the elaboration on that was, it's always also nice to get contributions from voices and places and disciplines that we haven't heard about or heard from as much, to engage in these conversations. So when we say new, in relation to what?
Yeah, and to bear in mind that business and management is a non-discipline that's made up of so many other disciplines. So the ways in which we draw on our disciplinary knowledge to actually advance the knowledge in work and organization, but putting gender at the center of the debates, or feminism at the center of debates, with all the intersectionality, particularly in relation to the power struggles and relations in local contexts, is really, really important to us. We see a lot of papers, as we said earlier, about gender being attached as a variable or as a particular way of seeing empirical insights, and that's not what we're looking for, because most of our rejected papers are from mainstream organization behavior papers. So we're a critical journal, as friends have already said. And sorry, I was reading that out again. It's gone midnight, but that's okay.
You're in the
You're used to
future,
it.
Alison.
And even when it comes to multidisciplinarity, even many of the methodologies that we use come from other disciplines, like autoethnography, for instance, or ethnography overall. I mean, it's interesting to see these connections, and then maybe just make a point and discuss how that can speak to the GW readership. I mean, to bring a different understanding and engage with that body of knowledge.
Okay, I think, thank you all so much. I think we've come to the end of questions, and I think we could talk about GWO forever, because it's such an amazing space. And but I think we better let Alison go to bed. And thank you again so much. I've certainly been inspired, and I feel hopeful again. Passion, your care, and everything that you do. So thank you, Alison and Banu and Emmanouela and Alice for joining us today. Just wanted to, so it's been great actually that some people have been asking for the reviewing workshop, because like as Kat put in the chat, that's on the books, it's coming soon, hopefully. There will be upcoming events, and we'll be updating, and as well as our next events in the Publishing Critical Work series. So watch this space. Do follow us on Eventbrite. That's where new events get announced, and do follow us on Twitter as well. We try to use as many channels as possible to promote critical work. And if you've particularly enjoyed an event like today's, then all of the past recordings of our events are available on YouTube channel, so you can watch them again to catch more new ones, from all the conversations. And we know some people even use them for teaching and things like that, so and training. So yes, do follow us on YouTube as well. And we are a completely open community to critical scholars and critical scholarship. So if any of you today, or of your friends or colleagues have any ideas for a CMS InTouch event, doesn't have to be about publishing, just has to be about something, a critical issue that is important to the critical management studies community that you feel passionately about. If you want to organize your own CMS InTouch event, please do get in touch with us. We are very open to your ideas and would love to hear from you. Even if you just by yourself, you don't know who else to do to organize an event with, we can help. We can put you in touch with people from around the globe. So yes, do get in touch, and we would love to hear from you. And I wanted also to say thank you to the CMS InTouch team behind the scenes. There's a lot of work going behind the scenes. So here with us today is Vijayta, Ritesh, Kirti, and Kat, and the wider CMS InTouch team is behind us as well, supporting us. So thank you, colleagues, and thank you to our participants. Thank you for being part of our community. Keep well, keep safe. Yes, stay safe and take care. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Hi, it went wonderful, I think. Audience wanted more, and even us, I thought.